Hello and welcome to Bridging the Classics, the podcast where we dust off the literary masterpieces of yesteryear and see just how brilliantly they shine in today's light. I'm your host, Sonia, and today we're diving into Jane Austen's beloved novel, Pride and Prejudice. Published in 1813, this witty romance has captivated readers for over 2 centuries with its sharp social commentary, memorable characters, and timeless themes. Whether you're a dedicated Austen fan, someone who's only experienced the story through one of its many adaptations, or completely new to the world of the Bennets and Mr. Darcy, there's something in this novel that speaks to our modern experiences. Today, we'll explore the historical context of Regency England, break down the plot and characters for newcomers, analyze the major themes and their relevance to our current society, take a deeper look at Elizabeth Bennet's character journey, and discuss how this classic has been adapted and reimagined over the years. So, grab your tea and settle in for a delightful conversation about one of literature's most enduring love stories. Before we dive into the story itself, let's set the scene of early 19th century England. Pride and Prejudice was written between 1796 and 1797, initially under the title First Impressions, but wasn't published until 1813. This places it firmly in the Regency era, a period of British history marked by the regency of the future King George IV while his father, King George III, was deemed unfit to rule due to mental illness. This was a time of significant social change and upheaval. The Napoleonic Wars were reshaping Europe, the Industrial Revolution was transforming the economy, and rigid social hierarchies dictated nearly every aspect of life, particularly for women. Jane Austen herself lived a relatively quiet life as the daughter of a country clergyman, never marrying and publishing her works anonymously as a lady. It's worth noting that writing was one of the few respectable ways a genteel woman could earn money in this period, though Austen earned relatively little from her novels during her lifetime. When Pride and Prejudice was published, it was an immediate success. One reviewer called it a very superior work, and Austen herself referred to it as her darling child. What many readers then and now might not fully appreciate is how subtly subversive Austen's work was. Beneath the romantic comedy and marriage plots lies a keen critique of the social constraints of her time, particularly for women. Women in Regency England had very limited options. They couldn't vote, had few property rights, and for middle and upper-class women like the Bennet sisters, earning a living was nearly impossible without sacrificing social status. Marriage was, as Charlotte Lucas so pragmatically puts it in the novel, the only honorable provision for well-educated young women of small fortune. This explains the near desperation of Mrs. Bennet to see her 5 daughters married well. It wasn't just about social climbing, it was about survival. The Bennet estate was entitled to a male heir, meaning that upon Mr. Bennet's death, his wife and daughters could be left almost destitute. This wasn't some fictional plot device, this was the reality for many families. And yet, within these constraints, Austen created a heroine who insists on marrying for love rather than security, a truly radical notion for her time. Elizabeth Bennet refuses an advantageous match that would have secured her future, choosing instead to wait for mutual respect and affection. That choice, to value personal happiness over financial security, was revolutionary in a way that might be hard for us to fully appreciate today. So what exactly happens in Pride and Prejudice? For those who haven't read it yet, and I envy you experiencing it for the first time, let me give you a spoiler-free overview. The story centers on the Bennet family, particularly the second eldest daughter, Elizabeth, or Lizzie as she's often called. The Bennets have 5 daughters, Jane, Elizabeth, Mary, Kitty, and Lydia, and no sons, which, as I mentioned earlier, means their estate will pass to a distant male cousin upon Mr. Bennet's death. Their mother, Mrs. Bennet, is therefore determined to see her daughters married well, and the arrival of a wealthy bachelor, Mr. Bingley, in the neighborhood sets the plot in motion. At a local assembly, Bingley is immediately taken with the eldest Bennet daughter, the beautiful and sweet-natured Jane. His friend, the even wealthier and more reserved Mr. Darcy, accompanies him but makes a poor first impression when he refuses to dance and is overheard making disparaging remarks about the company, including Elizabeth. As Jane and Bingley grow closer, Elizabeth and Darcy clash repeatedly. Their interactions are complicated by the arrival of Mr. Collins, the cousin who will inherit the Bennet estate, who comes seeking a wife among the Bennet sisters. There's also the charming officer, Mr. Wickham, who tells Elizabeth a tale of being wronged by Darcy, further cementing her poor opinion of him. What follows is a masterfully crafted dance of misunderstandings, gradual revelations, and evolving feelings. Elizabeth must navigate not only her changing feelings toward Darcy but also the often ridiculous social constraints of her world and the sometimes embarrassing behavior of her own family members. The novel's main characters are wonderfully drawn and complex. Elizabeth is intelligent, witty, and confident, though not without her blind spots. Darcy is proud and socially awkward, but possesses a strong moral code and capacity for growth. Jane is sweet and optimistic to a fault, while Bingley is good-natured but easily influenced. The supporting cast includes the pragmatic Charlotte Lucas, the officious Mr. Collins, the charming but morally bankrupt Wickham, and the formidable Lady Catherine de Bourgh. What makes these characters so enduring is how recognizable they remain today. We all know people like the status-obsessed Mrs. Bennet, the sarcastic Mr. Bennet who retreats from family chaos into his library, or the self-important Mr. Collins who constantly name-drops his prestigious connection to Lady Catherine. These character types transcend their Regency setting to feel remarkably familiar in our own time. Now, let's dig into the major themes of Pride and Prejudice and why they continue to resonate with modern readers. First, there's the obvious theme right in the title, Pride and Prejudice. Both Elizabeth and Darcy must overcome their preconceptions about each other and their own flaws. Elizabeth prejudges Darcy based on his initial standoffish behavior and Wickham's lies, while Darcy's pride leads him to look down on Elizabeth's family and connections. This theme remains incredibly relevant today. In our world of snap judgments, social media hot takes, and political polarization, we're constantly forming opinions with incomplete information. How often do we dismiss people based on first impressions or prejudge them based on their background, appearance, or social circle? Austen reminds us that these quick judgments are often wrong and that true understanding requires openness and self-reflection. In fact, there's that wonderful moment when Elizabeth reads Darcy's letter explaining his history with Wickham and his concerns about her family, and she thinks to herself, "How despicably I have acted. I, who have prided myself on my discernment. How humiliating is this discovery. Until this moment I never knew myself." That moment of self-awareness, recognizing our own biases and how they've led us astray, feels as important in 2025 as it was in 1813. In an era where we're increasingly aware of implicit biases and how they shape our perceptions, Austen's exploration of how Pride and Prejudice distort judgment feels remarkably prescient. The second major theme is marriage and economic security. Austen presents us with a variety of marriages in the novel: the mercenary match of Charlotte Lucas and Mr. Collins, the passionate but thoughtless union of Lydia and Wickham, the affectionate but unequal relationship of Jane and Bingley, and the balanced partnership of Elizabeth and Darcy, built on mutual respect and growing affection. While financial concerns in marriage may seem antiquated, they're still relevant. Today's young adults may not be focused on finding a spouse with $5,000 a year, but economic considerations still influence our relationships. Who pays for what on dates? How do couples navigate different income levels or spending habits? What happens when one partner makes significantly more than the other? These questions aren't so different from the financial dynamics Austen explores. And beyond romance, the novel's focus on women's limited economic options speaks to ongoing discussions about gender equality. Women no longer need to marry for financial survival, but we're still grappling with pay gaps, glass ceilings, and how to balance career and family. Charlotte Lucas's practical approach to marriage might make modern readers cringe, but many people still make relationship compromises for economic stability or social advantage. The third theme I want to highlight is class and social expectations. Austen subtly critiques the rigid class system of her time while acknowledging its power. Elizabeth and Darcy's relationship crosses class boundaries, his from the landed gentry with aristocratic connections, while she's from the less prestigious landed gentry with relatives in trade. Today, we might not have the same formal class divisions, but social stratification absolutely exists. Think about dating across socioeconomic lines, or the judgment sometimes faced by people who marry outside their class. Consider how often we evaluate people based on their education, profession, or cultural references. Lady Catherine's horror at the idea of Darcy marrying Elizabeth because of her inferior connections might find modern parallels in families concerned about their children marrying someone from a different socio-economic background, cultural tradition, or educational level. And while we're on this theme, let me share one of my favorite quotes from the novel. When Lady Catherine insists that Elizabeth should not aspire to rise above the sphere in which she has been brought up, Elizabeth replies, "In marrying your nephew, I should not consider myself as quitting that sphere. He is a gentleman, I am a gentleman's daughter, so far we are equal." That response, asserting her fundamental equality while acknowledging their different social positions, feels remarkably modern in its insistence on basic human dignity regardless of background. So, what if Pride and Prejudice were written today? We might see Elizabeth as a sharp-witted graduate student from a middle-class family with mounting student debt, while Darcy could be the aloof tech CEO from old money who initially dismisses her before recognizing her brilliance. Mrs. Bennet might be desperate for her daughters to marry into wealth and stability in an era of economic uncertainty, while Mr. Collins could be the socially awkward cousin who's always dropping names of the celebrities he's met through his job. The essential dynamics would remain recognizable, just in modern dress. Let's take a deeper dive into Elizabeth Bennet, one of literature's most enduring heroines. What makes Lizzie so appealing to generations of readers is her combination of intelligence, wit, and willingness to stand up for herself in a society that expected women to be compliant. Elizabeth's journey throughout the novel is one of self-discovery. She begins with complete confidence in her own judgment, proud of her ability to read people and situations. When she tells her sister Jane, "I could easily forgive his pride, if he had not mortified mine," she's acknowledging that her negative feelings toward Darcy stem partly from wounded vanity after overhearing his dismissive comments about her. What makes Elizabeth modern is her insistence on being valued for her mind rather than just her appearance or connections. When she rejects Darcy's first proposal, which, let's remember, would have secured her financial future and elevated her social standing, she does so because he has failed to treat her with respect. His proposal is famously insulting, focusing on how he loves her against his better judgment and despite her inferior family. Her response: "You could not have made me the offer of your hand in any possible way that would have tempted me to accept it." She refuses to be seen as a charity case or a conquest and demands to be approached as an equal. In today's world, Elizabeth might be compared to characters like Hermione Granger from Harry Potter, intelligent women who refuse to diminish themselves to please others, or perhaps to real-world figures like Malala Yousafzai, women who speak their minds despite social pressure to be more accommodating. Elizabeth's struggle also parallels modern dating dilemmas. How many of us have had to wade through misunderstandings in relationships, or deal with family members who embarrass us, or navigate the social media equivalent of the Meryton gossip mill? How many women today still face the challenge of being seen as too opinionated if they speak their minds as freely as Elizabeth does? What I find personally relatable about Elizabeth is her fallibility. She's not perfect, she's sometimes too quick to judge, too confident in her own perceptions. When she discovers her mistake about Wickham and Darcy, she has to confront her own pride and prejudice. That moment of humility and growth feels authentic and necessary. It's what makes her journey compelling rather than simply a tale of a perfect heroine who gets her man. I remember when I first read the novel as a teenager, I was struck by Elizabeth's refusal to marry without respect and affection. At a time when I was navigating my own sense of identity and worth, her insistence on being valued for who she truly was, her mind, her principles, her essential self, felt revolutionary. Years later, that aspect of her character still resonates with me, and I suspect with many other readers as well. One of the reasons Pride and Prejudice remains so vibrant in our cultural consciousness is its remarkable adaptability. Few classic novels have inspired as many adaptations, retellings, and homages across different media. The most famous adaptation is probably the 1995 BBC miniseries starring Jennifer Ely as Elizabeth and Colin Firth as Darcy. This version, with its famous lake scene, which, I should note, doesn't actually appear in the novel, defined Darcy for a generation and brought new readers to Austen's work. The 2005 film, directed by Joe Wright and starring Keira Knightley and Matthew McFadden, offered a more romantic, visually lush interpretation that emphasized the emotional undercurrents of the story. But adaptations extend far beyond straightforward period pieces. The 2001 film Bridget Jones's Diary, based on Helen Fielding's novel, reimagined the story in contemporary London with Bridget as a modern Elizabeth and Mark Darcy, again played by Colin Firth, as her proud love interest. The 2004 Bollywood film Bride and Prejudice transferred the story to India, highlighting how the themes of class, family pressure, and complex courtship transcend cultural boundaries. In literature, we've seen endless variations. Pride and Prejudice and Zombies added the undead to Regency England. Curtis Sittenfeld's Eligible moved the story to modern Cincinnati with Elizabeth as a magazine writer and Darcy as a neurosurgeon. Aisha at Last by Esma Jalaluddin transplanted the plot to a Muslim community in Canada. The 2020 Hulu series High Fidelity gender-swapped the story, while the popular YouTube series The Lizzie Bennet Diaries reimagined it as a video blog. Even The Simpsons has done a Pride and Prejudice episode. What's fascinating about these adaptations is how they modify the original to speak to contemporary audiences while preserving the essential dynamics. Modern versions often amplify Elizabeth's independence and feminist sensibilities, which were more subtly expressed in Austen's time. They might make explicit the economic realities that Austen delicately addressed, or highlight issues of race, sexuality, or cultural identity that weren't part of her original text. For instance, contemporary adaptations often struggle with Darcy's wealth. In Austen's time, inherited wealth from land ownership was common and relatively uncontroversial. Today, extreme wealth inequality is more politically charged, so modern Darcys are often given professions, doctor, lawyer, tech entrepreneur, to justify their wealth through work rather than inheritance. Similarly, the marriage imperative has to be rethought for modern settings where women have career options. Instead of focusing on marriage as economic necessity, modern adaptations often emphasize the emotional and social pressure to partner up or explore how career ambitions complicate relationships. What all these adaptations prove is the enduring power of Austen's character dynamics and basic story structure. Strip away the Regency setting, and you still have a compelling tale of two people overcoming their worst tendencies, pride and prejudice, to see each other clearly and form a more perfect union. That journey from misunderstanding to understanding, from judgment to empathy, remains as relevant now as it was 2 centuries ago. As we wrap up today's exploration of Pride and Prejudice, I'm struck again by how thoroughly modern Jane Austen feels despite the centuries that separate us. Her keen observation of human foibles, her subtle wit, and her compassionate yet clear-eyed view of society all translate seamlessly to our time. If you've never read Pride and Prejudice, I truly hope this discussion has inspired you to pick it up. And if you're already a fan, perhaps it's time for a reread with fresh eyes, looking for those connections to our contemporary concerns about class, gender, economic security, and authentic relationships. For those wanting to explore more of Austen's work after this, I'd recommend Persuasion, her last completed novel, which deals with second chances and features an older, more reflective heroine. Or try Emma, with its more privileged but equally flawed protagonist who must learn similar lessons about misreading situations and people. If you're interested in other classic novels that offer keen social observation with a touch of romance, you might enjoy the works of the Brontë sisters, particularly Charlotte Bronté's Jane Eyre, or George Eliot's Middlemarch, which offers an even broader canvas of social observation. For more recent works that capture some of Austen's sensibility, try Zadie Smith's On Beauty or Barbara P.Wham's mid-20th century novels. Next time on Bridging the Classics, we'll be discussing Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, another novel from the 19th century that speaks with uncanny relevance to our technological anxieties and questions about what it means to be human. Until then, keep reading, keep thinking, and remember Elizabeth Bennet's wise words, "I never knew myself." Thanks for listening to Bridging the Classics. I'm Sonia, reminding you that great literature never goes out of style.
Before we go, please subscribe, like, hit the notification button, and leave comments and suggestions if you are on YouTube. For those who are listening to us on another podcast platform, please subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. Visit bridgingtheclassics.com for more information on the book, such as a study guide, frequently asked questions, timeline and characters, and more.